There is no way to rule innocent men. The only power government has is the power to crack down on criminals. And when there aren't enough criminals, one makes them. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. And that quote comes from Ayn Rand. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I'll be your host for the next hour. Well, folks, it has long been predicted that 2012 will be a year of change, and we are absolutely seeing that change come about. But it isn't the change that most people were expecting. It's change of a very different sort. Now, in 2008, I released a film called The Big Picture, and I said in that film that in 2012, what we will see happening is not a cataclysm or the end of the world or the birth of a new humanity, but we will see the year that the New World Order begins in earnest, if we the people fail to do anything about it. And don't get me wrong with this either, folks. I mean, sure, we could see the birth of a new humanity if the people of the planet were to apply themselves to the situation that we face. And that's the only way that any type of conscious evolution or ascension or anything like that will actually happen, folks, if people apply themselves to it. And it will be if people fail to apply themselves to it that then we will see the birth of the New World Order in earnest. And what we've seen so far this year, folks, in the first 3 months has been absolutely phenomenal. Really, we've seen so much new legislation being brought in all countries across the board, or all Western countries at least. We've seen the introduction of incredibly repressive bills in America. We've seen the implementation of carbon tax and mandatory body scanners at airports being introduced in Australia. And the icing on the cake is the passing through the New Zealand Parliament on March 22nd of the Search and Surveillance Bill. And this bill is due to come into effect on April 18th. And folks, it can only be described as something similar to the American Patriot Act on steroids. It is absolutely the most Nazi piece of legislation I've ever seen. And the scope of the bill is absolutely amazing. It allows the government to look at people's texts, their voicemails, put bugs in their cars, and watch their chat room videos. And it gives these powers to 70 different government agencies, like agencies you've probably never heard of. And if someone is detained under this bill, then enforcement officers can search that person's home and workplace, and also their friends. Okay, they're friends as well. Now, you don't have to be guilty of anything, folks. You don't even have to be arrested. You only have to be detained. Okay, are you hearing this? Now, this is a bill which absolutely removes the liberties and freedoms of everybody. And it grants the police incredibly extended powers without the approval of the judiciary. Okay, and it allows any person, I mean, they could detain you for whatever reason. I mean, they could pull you over for a random breath test and just detain you because they believe that you need a further breath test back at the station. They could detain you because a shop's been broken in down the road and you fit the description of the person who did it. And you may not be that person, but you may look similar. You know, you've got brown hair, 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 head, 2 arms. So you look like this person. And so now that they've detained you, they have the power to go back and search your house and search the houses of your friends, to bug your grandmother's telephone, install a hidden camera in your daughter's bathroom, download the files from your wife's computer, and steal everything from your computer without ever having to prove that you have committed a crime or that one will be committed. Okay? That's how broad this bill is. And this can't be overstated, folks, because this is giving 70 government agencies within New Zealand Gestapo-like powers. And that's what this is, folks. This is the formation of the Gestapo in New Zealand. I mean, one can only question if the next thing we'll see on the cards from the New Zealand government will be death squads. It seems to be a natural progression from legislation such as this. I mean, let's face it, folks, if they want to top it, then I don't really see that they have anywhere else to go. And folks, it is due to legislation exactly the same as this. Legislation which a government chose to impose not only upon its own people, but also to inflict upon the people of the rest of the world, that we fought what is known as World War II. This is exactly why the world went to war with Germany. Well, that's what we're told anyway. Of course, there were vastly different reasons why we were at war with Germany, but we were told that it was because of the terrible brutality of Hitler's regime and their willingness to impose a legislation just like this upon their citizens. And as I've often said, folks, what they do is they try these pieces of legislation in one country and they see how it's received, and then they just go about implementing it in all countries. And it's a gradual process. But what you find is that every country ends up being the testing ground for new types of laws and legislation, and it gets tried in various countries, and sometimes it gets tried several times before it's actually brought in. But eventually they do get it in, and when they've found the model that works, then they extrapolate it out across the rest of the world and bring it in to other countries. Always gradually, of course, but the point is that once you see it introduced in one country, then you see it come along and get introduced into other countries using virtually the same method. You see, a global government already exists, folks. It's just that it's covert, it's behind the scenes. And what these people are doing now is simply consolidating their power by writing more and more legislation designed to remove more and more of the rights of the people, eliminate more and more actual law from the planet, and to further impose their will over the people that they are employed to protect and to actually do exactly the opposite of what they're doing. But the problem is that the people have forgotten that we actually employ the government and that legislation is not law. It is simply statute regulations given power via our consent to these regulations. So we really need to adjust our perception of the social hierarchy here, folks, and we really need to remember who the boss of these governments is, because it is us, it is we the people. So this type of legislation needs to be completely boycotted in mass, and any police officer that enforces this type of legislation as well is breaking the law. They might be acting within the parameters of legislation, but they're breaking natural law, they're breaking common law, and they're not doing the job that we employ them to do. And folks, legislation such as this really, really should be considered a crime against humanity, and the people who enacted it should be held accountable in an international court of some description. If we could find one of those that was anywhere near honest, it would probably help. But ultimately, folks, the politicians that did vote on this bill and did pass this bill in need to be arrested, because they are most certainly not the friends of the New Zealand people. They're very dangerous, these type of people, folks, but you can see by their willingness to enact legislation like this that they also know how bad they are, and they are getting quite scared that people are finding out, and so they are wishing to put in all these parameters in order to contain the people who are waking up and to remove them from the public eye and to protect their own positions. And this is always done at the expense of the countries that these people are supposedly serving. And we see the same thing here in Australia, folks. Julia Gillard is bringing in all sorts of nasty pieces of legislation while she's selling the country off to foreign mining interests, and she's done this consistently ever since taking office. And you just got to look at what Obama's done in the United States. I mean, some of the bills that have been brought in over there have been absolutely shocking. And it's happening right across the board, folks. It's happening in Sweden. It's happening everywhere. They're bringing in all sorts of legislation under the rug while people aren't looking. And what we are seeing with this, and what we will continue to see more of this year, is the merger and expansion of the global corporate machine as it continues to refine its apparatus. Folks, this is exactly what the world was standing up against in World War II. This is a Nazi system that is being implemented in all Western countries. And as I've said on other occasions, folks, in World War II, it wasn't the Nazis that lost the war, it was Germany that lost the war. The Nazis were actually financed by Rothschild banks. They were supplied by Western corporations. And you can't say that Hitler was so much against Jews, folks, because there were quite literally thousands of Zionist Jews who were members of the SS. And what they did is they used the Semitic Jews of the area and they persecuted them, and they used the event to set up the State of Israel so they could create further instability in the world and bring about the situation that they have now brought about. And they tested all of the methodology in World War II as well. They had all the death camps, which were full of not just Jews, folks, but Austrians and anybody who spoke out against the system. And they tried all the fluoride on these people, all the mind control, genetics. They did massive amounts of research into electromagnetism. And they tried many other methods of social control and the use of propaganda on the German people, and they found out how to mould the mindset of the people. You see, in World War II, the German people thought they were the good guys. That's the thing. Much the way the American people do at the moment, much the way the New Zealand people do. Even in response to this law that's come in New Zealand, there's been people posting comments saying, oh, well, nothing to hide, nothing to fear. Unless you're actually breaking the law, you shouldn't have anything to fear. And that's exactly what the German people said, folks. They don't understand the broad scope of this legislation that's been brought in. And this is an exact repeat. See, it's like I said in the opening quote, folks, the government cannot control innocent people. The only real power the government has is to crack down on criminals. And so what they do is they make almost everything against the law. And so here we have them granting these incredibly broad powers to police, and now all they have to do is bring in all these little bits of legislation after it to make virtually everything you do illegal. So if you even step outside of the lines, you will be detained. And if you're detained, then they can do all this stuff to you. And this is exactly the way it works. It's exactly what they did in Nazi Germany, only it's even worse, really, than what they did in Nazi Germany. You see, what they did in Germany in World War II is basically a beta test to test the system so that they could put it in place across the entire Western world, which is what they've done since World War II. The Nazi Empire was basically smuggled out of Germany through the Vatican. It went into America and South America. They set up the CIA, the NSA. They set up NASA so they could siphon off lots of money for black budgets. They set up the United Nations. And then they went out and they started theatres of conflict all across the world, so they were able to put bases, military bases, all around the planet. And now that they have got all of these military bases stationed around the planet, and it's escalated to the point where Western society is now beginning to wake up to what's going on, they are now implementing this entire Nazi system and this entire lockdown of human freedoms across all the Western world. Because the only way they're really going to get away with taking over the rest of the world that they haven't yet got is to repress the people within their countries. Because obviously most of the people in Western countries don't really want their government going out and creating theatres of conflict and wars and destroying human life around the planet the way our governments have been doing. And they are waking up to this. And so now it's very important for the government to bring in all of these incredibly draconian and obviously Nazi pieces of legislation in order to quell any dissent that may erupt within their countries as they prepare to destroy those parts of the world that they have not yet violated. And there's certainly not much of that left, folks. I mean, just the use of depleted uranium and the onset of genetically modified plants and foods and organisms all over the planet has already caused an incredible amount of damage to the globe, and there simply aren't too many places left that are unaffected by the destruction that is Western society. But those places that are left unaffected will certainly not remain that way for long if those people who currently control the direction the ship of state is sailing in have any part of their way at all. And those people out there who approve of legislation such as that which has just been introduced in New Zealand and who say nothing to hide, nothing to fear, really need to turn that around and apply it to the government. Nothing to hide, nothing to fear. Why would the government be in so much fear for itself that it would need to impose these type of draconian measures upon the people of the country? I mean, think about it, folks. Look around you. Where's all the violent crime? Where's all the terrorism that creates a need for these laws? And are the people of the country able to apply these same type of measures to the politicians? Because if they're not able to apply these types of measures to the politicians, like, detain a politician because he broke an election promise and so he was basically committed fraud. And of course, what about if the people perceive a war or an invasion may be illegal? Are we able to suspect the government of committing a crime then? What about the destruction of the water table that we suspect may be happening through fracking? I mean, of course, it's illegal to destroy water, to pollute groundwater, so even under that,